This is Terms of Reference. Today's guest is Michael Klein, the director of the Washington, D.C.-based International Solutions Group, a humanitarian aid and development-focused management consulting firm that specializes in program performance, private sector development, capacity building, and information technology development.
Mike, thanks for joining us on Terms of Reference today. I really appreciate your time. I want to start off by asking you to tell us about what International Solutions Group does. Where are you in the space? What is it that you do? How do you position yourself with clients?
Great. Well, just to start off, thanks, Stephen, for having me. Looking forward to having a little chat here. In terms of ISG and what we do, we are a boutique advisory firm focused on the area of performance. And what I mean by that is providing donors and NGOs in the international development space feedback, whether that be monitoring and evaluation or strategy type consulting work on the work that they're doing in that space. We're, like I said, boutique in size, and we tailor teams that fit specific project and program needs.
As a company that's been operating in this space for almost 10 years, what makes international development and humanitarian aid different from other consulting work for you? You've been in management consulting, sort of classic management consulting. What's the difference there?
Sure. So within the private sector and general management consulting, I've worked in the corporate finance space, and I would say responsiveness of a potential client and the bureaucracy you interface with is probably the main differing factors. In terms of the private sector, what you see is typically a need can be very, very sharp, poignant need that needs to be addressed in real time, and you often see that same type of needs within international development institution. Within the private sector, they have the ability to act and react, fairly quickly to solving these issues. And with international development institutions, such as UN agencies, they lack this kind of a nimble structure to be able to respond. And it comes through very clearly in their procurement processes, and it comes through very clearly in the structure and hierarchy of these organizations. So whereas a tender can be won or awarded or provided for consultancy services almost overnight in the private sector, sometimes these same tenders last months, if not maybe even a year within an international development organization. And that's I would say that's probably the biggest hardship that we deal with.
Is there a way that you can turn that into an opportunity?
Absolutely.
The rigidity. How do you turn that specific challenge into an opportunity?
Absolutely. I think probably the main advantage is understanding how these organizations work, and patience, as the idiom goes, is patience is a virtue. So being able to sit back, understand the process that you're working within, and then provide your client with everything they need, and being very responsive to their procurement procedures. And also understanding the types of procedures that are in place. Sometimes having to understand them better than your client themselves. I mean, for instance, we're currently engaged with a client. They provided us a contract, and within the contract, they left in draft template language. Had I taken that contract and provided it right back to them, filled it out with the draft contract language, we probably wouldn't have had that contract approved, and probably would have been through 2 or 3 more iterations with the legal department. Instead, understanding really what it is they need and addressing that. And that starts all the way at the very beginning of a tender process and runs through to the very end when you're actually providing services.
What are some of is there a service challenge that you find different than, sort of traditional management consulting?
Sure. I would say within the private sector, there is a general understanding of what is known and unknown. And when consultants are engaged, it's because they've entered kind of an unknown territory. This area where they realize they do not have the expertise, and the design of a tender or tender process can be, clearly tailored so that they are receiving the consultancy services that they need, because there is an iterative process between them and the expert who is going to be providing the services. It can still be a competitive process. Within the international development business, because of competitive procedures and the way tenders are run, oftentimes you come across tenders that are being issued that simply don't make sense. They don't make sense because the person putting together the tender does not have the requisite knowledge or skill set to be able to draft the services or understand what they're looking for. And that is a huge impediment to engaging with large international development organizations.
That's really interesting. When you were talking about the services, where my mind was going was the difference between the bidding process and the actual implementation process. What have you found, and if it's possible to qualify this, what's more difficult? Is it more difficult to win the work, or is it more difficult to actually then perform the work? Because the way that you're describing it right now, it's you're basically helping to define the work that you're doing. So is it where do you find the
Absolutely, and I think just from the nature of the questions that are being asked and my responses, you can tell. I think probably the hardest thing in our business is winning new work. It's winning new work. There's the technical expertise in the international development business in spades. There are people and consultants with 30, 40 years experience. They know organizations and institutions inside and out. They're bringing master's degrees, PhDs to the table, and engaging them is usually fairly painless. The winning of the work, however, is something entirely different. These same masters and PhDs with 30 years of experience, when they're talking about their thematic area or their subject matter expertise, that same technical expertise cannot be applied within the procurement process. You almost have to have a doctorate in procurement to understand what's going on within a typical procedure.
I'd love to see a doctorate in procurement come out of one. I could see George Mason, putting that out there next week.
Absolutely. And so that's what we, a lot of the times that's what we have to focus on is breaking down this barrier and understanding what a client really needs, so that we can engage, truly international, truly excellent consultants to do the work, which everybody wants. That's the goal at the end of the day on behalf of the client, on behalf of ISG, is to deliver the services that are meaningful to our client. And getting there is the procurement barrier that you always face.
So, an aidpreneur here, where terms of reference exists, we focus on both small firms, small companies, NGOs, and we also look at individual independent professionals. Mm-hmm. Does that same answer apply to the individual? Because right now you were talking sort of as a small company, mm-hmm. Or even as a larger international organization or NGO. Winning the work is the big deal. What about as an individual consultant? Would that still hold true for you?
I would say less so, but yes. As a individual consultant, the tender procedures that exist and that are out there for smaller bits of business give these international development organizations more ability, more leverage to be able to go out and procure their services kind of off the street. And when you try to scale that, it's very, very hard. So that's when you get into the actual consulting business versus being an individual consultant. Trying to scale your own time is just keeping yourself engaged, is really putting your CV out there and interacting and networking within the international development community. Trying to scale it as a business is when you bump into this kind of procurement hurdle where if I'm going to stop doing little bits of work as under my own CV and instead do it under, say, an LLC or a small business, suddenly I'm interacting and I'm competing against some very large firms and some very regimented procurement procedures.
So let's take that one step further. You are the director of a boutique consulting company in this space. You've been around for a long time, so you've clearly been successful. You have a model that you have to rely upon these consultants to fill out teams. What are you looking for in a great consultant? What are you looking for when you're either looking through CVs or you're interviewing someone? What are the 2 or 3 critical factors that usually make or break somebody getting on a team with you?
Sure. So when I first look at a tender, the thing in the back of my mind is, who do I trust that I can reach out to that could do some excellent work for the client for this particular opportunity? The technical skill sets that exist in our space, as I said before, they're there in spades. Reaching out to technical experts is is oftentimes a very time-consuming part of the tender process. And I want to minimize that as much as possible. And so I would say the very first thing that I look for is responsiveness. If I put an email out, whether that be on a Saturday night to a potential consultant, I'm not usually putting out one email. I'm usually putting out 3 or 5. I'm looking for someone, and I've identified, if it's you, your skill set as being an integral part of my bid. And responsiveness is really how you're going to win business from me in that sense. And then it's going to be, we're going to move forward with an interview process. I'm going to vet your CV. I'm going to look into who you are and what you've done. And are you really a good fit? Do you have the language capacity? Is the language capacity, accurately portrayed in your CV? Same as your experience. And, then we're building trust. And, this is all part of, feeling each other out. And this is you seeing if you work well with my team, and also vice versa. And I would say, trust is the second part. And that takes a long time to build. And so I have certain consultants that I will engage, over the course of an evening to do a couple days worth of work where I can just send them a quick email. And there's others that take, a substantially longer period of time to be able to draft out a task order or a small contract for them to work within. And it's much more of a bureaucratic process. Now, for me, I much prefer working with people I work with, have worked with before, and I trust to do the work. And so being able to engage someone on the fly is a big advantage.
How do you, trying to think of how I want to ask this question, I think it's a fairly common knowledge that we like to work with who we've worked with in the past. Especially, if you've had success with someone in the past, you want to try to repeat that success. Does that lead to sometimes trying to fit a square peg in a round hole? Or is that a problem that you've experienced?
When I would say that really it's in the eye of the beholder. Oftentimes a client is going to pick up on this. If I'm trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, the client is usually going to pick up on that as well. They're going to look at the CV and say, Mike, this isn't a good fit. I'm not sure why this CV is here. Or, this team leader doesn't really represent the skills that we had asked for in the RFP. So I would say that's usually less of a concern.
Winning business is the most difficult process, as you described a few minutes ago. So as you're looking to continue to either maintain or grow ISG over the next 5 years, what is it that you're focusing on? How are you going to continue to shape the team that you have, the people you hire, the type of work that you look for? What's that look like in your mind right now? Sure.
So, and as I've said many times, there's really 3 things you need in this business to succeed, to be able to win work, to then go out there and perform it. It's, for starters, you need to have done it before, which is kind of a catch-22. Because if I'm bidding on a new project and I've never particularly done this, it's going to be very hard for me to have won it. And so that's where being enterprising, networking within the international development community, having partners that really plays to your strengths and enables you to go out there and bid for work that may not necessarily be right up your alley, but maybe perhaps in a space that you want to begin to broaden your credentials in. So that's the first thing you need to do. The second is be able to have people that can do the work and be able to network, again, within the international development community to be able to have those technical experts you can leverage on your bids. Because at the end of the day, we're coming down to usually a formula. This is how I'm scored against others. There's a framework that I'm being scored against, and if I have the best people, I stand a good chance of winning that work. And then lastly, I have to know where that business is coming from. And that is really that's all about knowing the types of lists and networks that are out there that are publishing tenders or that are putting out RFPs. Additionally, that's knowing where the industry is headed. And I think we're in a very kind of special time right now where international NGOs, donors, especially kind of the Western world is being squeezed for donor dollars, and they're looking to get more for less. The just general level of indebtedness of the Western Europe, as well as which is where a lot of the donors come from, as well as the United States, is what we're seeing is a increased focus on effectiveness of programming. In addition to that, in addition to that, we're seeing a move within the private sector, organizations like the Gates Foundation, which are growing almost exponentially. And for us, as a small boutique firm focused on evaluating programming and providing lessons learned, I think it's a crucial time for us to be able to bridge that divide and look for those opportunities. And I think that's a challenge for everybody, being able to figure out, if we remain static and look for the projects where they've always come from, eventually that pool of projects and opportunities is going to dry up. We need to continue looking to expand our focus, especially because of the good we do within our space. Be able to provide lessons learned, being able to act as an archive to be able to be drawn upon for new projects that are ramping up, so that we're not having to reinvent the wheel.
As you continue to work with clients, what's your formula for ensuring that your client's always happy?
I think communication is probably key. That's the most important thing we have. And it's also something that's very difficult in our business, as our technical expertise doesn't always necessarily match up with our where we are or located geographically. So, currently we have several clients in Southeast Asia, and being able to ensure that we are in constant communication with that client can sometimes be painful for the whole project team, for me in particular. But so long as you keep the communication lines open and you're responsive to their requests and expectations are set, I think this is a very straightforward business. We are delivering something that involves taking, digesting, and synthesizing data and then giving it back to a client. And it's in delivering results and ensuring that my client is happy at the end of the day. If we've kept in communication, if we've made sure that dialogue is happening, there are no surprises at the end of the day. They know in real time how this project is beginning to shape up. If we do come to the end and there are surprises, that's a reflection on how well we've been able to keep in touch and really just the level of dialogue that we've had.
And so what do you do when that dialogue breaks down somewhere along the way, when either a project goes pear-shaped or a client becomes combative? What's your, how do you address that? How do you make sure that you get back on track?
Sure. Within our organization, I think there's one thing that we have to make sure that we always have is that own in-house technical expertise in the area of performance and monitoring and evaluation. This way, if a client comes back, and this has recently happened as well. This has happened in that we had a client, we're 3/4 of the way through the project. It seemed to be going swimmingly, and 3/4 in, we're through draft reports, and we're shocked, and they're shocked by we're shocked by the feedback we're being provided on our draft report, and they're shocked by what they perceive as quality issues within the document. And so what we have to do is take this in-house technical expertise and be able to leverage that. Perhaps we no longer have the resources of an entire project team, but we need to be able to put forward the additional resources and double down on this communication effort, so that at the end of the day, we're addressing what they see as flaws or gaps or holes in our evaluation report. This is an evaluation. And ensure that we are, as we say in our proposals, we are tailoring this report to their specifications and their needs. And for that particular project, it took us months of additional in-house time. But at the end of the day, we have a client that's going to be an advocate for us, and has put forward an email to us at the end of the project saying, please, if you need a reference, here's my name and email.
Last question. A lot of the people who are going to be listening to this podcast are either considering entering the development field or are new to the field. They're graduating with a master's degree or trying to get their feet wet. What's your sage advice for someone who's just starting out about how to get that first internship or how to get that first gig and then leverage that to continue to grow a career?
Sure. So the thing I always tell my team members is that, if you can win a tender, you'll always have a job in international development. If you can write a grant, if you can respond to a proposal, you will never be unemployed. You will always be able to go out there and win business. Additionally, make it something you love. Make it an area that you find truly interesting that you can throw yourself at. And then it's not really work. If you're responding to things that you are passionate about and that you care for, and you're also good at it, if you're good at winning business, you will forever be employed, and it's not going to feel like work. For me, every tender that comes across my desk is a new challenge, new opportunity. There is no day that's like yesterday. It doesn't feel like I'm reinventing the wheel every time I start to put together a proposal. It's a new challenge. And, I've networked with thousands of people in the international development business. And just that, I think, has paid for itself. I mean, without compensation aside, I mean, just being able to have that community that you're working with, I think is truly something special.
Mike, thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Stephen.
Have a great day.
Hello?
You've been listening to Terms of Reference, a weekly podcast from aidpreneur.com. Find us on iTunes or at www.aidpreneur.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.